Basically, I'm a big believer in get your stuff out there, write as much as possible, and spend an equal amount of time getting your stuff out there. I've already said it 10 times in here. You know, I very much believe in that because that's ultimately how I got connected with In the Heights. You know, I was writing a lot of plays and I was submitting them everywhere I knew and putting them up myself and creating my own readings. And basically, I produced a reading of my own of a play, and someone who was involved in the Heights happened to come see it. I don't know what got them there. I don't know how they heard about it, but it was about North Philly. It was about a Puerto Rican block in North Philly, and they were like, hey, I know this guy who's writing about a block that's really similar, but it's set in New York. And he's looking for a playwright. He's like this hip-hop guy, and he writes music, and he writes lyrics, and he's looking for a playwright. He's like, I think you two might really hit it off. Do you mind if I give him your number? And, that's what I live for. I'm like, yes, take my number, give me his number, let's get in the room, let's make some work together. So he and I sat down, and he was born and raised in Washington Heights, which is like very similar to kind of the Puerto Rican section in North Philly. But it's New York, so it's bigger, there's more resources and stuff, but we started trading our family stories, and we were like, oh my God, you are my long lost cousin. Like, we had so many things that were similar, so we decided we wanted to work together. He had already written the book, the music, and Lin-Manuel is the composer and the lyricist on Heights, and so he and I got in a room. He had already written a lot of songs. He had thought of the characters. He had this sound that was awesome. He said he wanted it to sound like, he wanted to create a musical that sounded like you walked through 10 blocks of Washington Heights. So here you're passing a bodega and you hear reggaeton blasting out of that bodega. And then there's the laundromat, and there's bachata in that laundromat. And then there's an opera singer practicing out of her third floor window on the next block. Just like all the different sounds you're going to hear in a Latin neighborhood, but that is still New York City. So he had this really cool sound for the show, and we kept some of the characters. I knew I wanted it to be 3 generations because I thought we had a sense early on this is going to be a big show. Sometimes it's just a monologue for a small theater. Maybe 50 people will see it a night. Sometimes this is a story for 1,200 people to hear a night. And we had that sense early on. So I said, okay, if we think all those people are going to come to see this show, I want to create things as the book writer that everyone in the audience can find their own way in. So I wanted to write a multi-generational story. So there's a 16-year-old kid, there's the parents' generation, let's say the 40s, and there's the abuela's generation, the grandmother's generation who grew up on a different island. And that was my way to say, okay, people can find what might relate to this generation's story more. They might relate to that generation's story more. So I created these 3 generations of people that all lived on the same block, 3 family-owned businesses, and I'd write a scene. I'd say, okay, I have a story idea. This girl's going to college, but she's the first in her family to go to college. She left, she was terrified, she's on scholarship, and she goes to a very wealthy, privileged college, and she is terrified, and she gets stuck. Okay, I have this idea for a scene. I'm gonna go home and write the scene. Sometimes you plan the plot ahead of time, and sometimes you have no idea, and you get inspired, and it's like, no, this is what it has to be, and I have to shift everything to make this work. So I go home, I write this scene. I'm on fire, Lin, yeah, I have this idea. Don't write anything tonight, just wait, I'm gonna bring in this scene tomorrow, I'm gonna bring this, we'll play some video games at your place, and then we're gonna write. So I'm writing the scene all night, I bring it into his apartment. We get Chinese takeout. We played a lot of video games while we were writing this piece, because then you get stuck and you're like, I have no idea, I'm out of ideas. Then we'll play video games for an hour, and then we're like, okay, time to write again. And these would be like 6-hour sessions, that we'd be together writing. So it's hard. You get tired, you get cranky, we're like arguing with each other. We're like siblings very quickly, like we love each other and we fight all the time. So I come in with the scene, and he's like, oh my God, I love the scene. This is what we're gonna this is gonna be in the middle of Act 1. How do we get to this point in Act 1? How do we lead up? How does the abuela care about the story? How do the parents care about the story? When do we first see this character? How and when you decide to introduce a character on your stage is huge. How are they going to enter? What's the first line we're going to hear? It could just be that they walk on stage and go, hey, what's going on? Okay, fine. I still have more to learn about you. Or they could come running on stage and say, your car has a flat tire and I busted it, or something stronger. So it's like, are you going to make a strong entrance for a character? So we're wondering all these things. I'm like, oh my God, this is the best scene I've ever written. This scene is so awesome. So then I go home that night. He's like, okay, I'm going to write a song. I have an idea for a song. So then he calls me the next day. You got to come over. I have this song. You got to come hear the song. Okay, I'm so excited. I bring my new scene. I've written some other ideas. Okay, here's a scene that can lead right up to that moment. Here's a scene that's like the aftermath of that moment. So I get to his house, and what does he do? He plays me a song in which he stole every line I had written in the scene. He turned my great scene, the best scene I'd ever written, into a song. And I'm like, wait a second. No. That's my scene. But he's like, well, but it's better as a song. And so I hear the song, and I'm like, oh, man, he's right. It's a really good song. So, but the song only says 75% of the information that the audience needs to hear to get the story. So now I got to delete my whole scene, figure out what other information does the audience need that's not filled in by the song, and somehow create a really brilliant scene that leads up to the song that gives them that information. Okay, so imagine this for 4 years. 4 years we wrote this together. Every moment, then he would write a song. I had to exact revenge. I'm not going to let someone do that to me. So he would write a song, and I'd be like, oh, guess what? The next day, that beautiful song you wrote, look at this scene, and it's even better than your song. So we did a lot. We're collaborating. So we're stealing a lot from each other. I mean, really, it's this place where the ideas come out of our mouths, and then they kind of start to combust, and we're taking ideas from each other. We're working in the room together. And after 4 years of that, we have this piece that we think, okay, we're ready for this. Twice a year leading up to that, we'd call our friends and say, look, we saved up some money, we'll buy you all pizzas. Can you come to my house, come to Lynn's house? We just read it out loud for us, because we don't know if it's funny, we don't know if the rhythm is right. So our friends would come over, and we'd feed them, a slice of pizza, and they'd read it for us, and we'd go, okay, that scene works. Everyone laughed at that scene, but this scene wasn't funny at all, and we thought that was the funny song or something like that. So, we keep doing that, hearing our own work that way. And then we got to Off-Broadway, a small theater. Well, it's 499 seats. Off-Broadway and Broadway are technical terms about union contracts. And it started to catch on. It's very hard with original musicals. When you're doing an adaptation, like I said, my MTV show is an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. Okay, well, I have a sense that in general that story works because it's been around for this long. It's a story that works. But within the Heights, we have no idea if it's a story that's going to interest people. So we're always doing these little readings to find out, are we going to make people cry at this moment? This kind of thing. So then we made it to Off-Broadway, and then there's a preview period. Before the critics come, where you're still supposed to be changing stuff. So if I wrote a joke that 3 nights in a row, no one laughed at, I'm like, oh God, I got to write a better joke. And it's hard writing jokes, so I'm like, it's like I'll spend a whole day trying to fix one line, talk about going crazy. So then I'll put in another joke. Okay, about 20 people laughed out of about 400 people. I'm going in the right direction, but it's not there yet, So we did that for 3 weeks of previews. We're writing, and then the show opens and we can't touch it. So then it's running for 6 months, and it's just very clear, the scenes, you feel the energy for the audience. It's very clear when the audience is going, oh, this is cool, what's going to happen next? And when the audience is going, it's just really clear when that's happening. So we close off Broadway. We got good reviews. Our producers wanted to move us to Broadway. But we knew we had a lot of work to do, because Act 2 was like a mess. We have a salon where there's a lot of comic material in the salon, and 75% of the jokes were working and a lot of them weren't. So I was like, I got to get every joke. It's a comedy, so I got to get every joke. These people are paying, some of them are paying $20 a ticket, some of them are paying $100 a ticket, and I don't want to cheat them. I want them to get their money's worth. So if I'm not trying my hardest to make every joke good, then I'm cheating them. So we do that for 6 months, and then we open on Broadway for 6 months. That's the story of how we created it. People look at something like Broadway, and they think, it's kind of a pipe dream, it's a pie in the sky. Well, I feel very lucky. I do feel like in some ways I won the lottery. But at the same time, it wasn't some magic thing that just landed on my doorstep. It just came out of us doing the work, getting our stuff out there, and we also got very lucky on top of that. The more you put your stuff out there, the more opportunity for luck you're giving yourself, though. So that's my story within the Heights.